presidential race, I believe it's next July. So it will be interesting to see if the incumbent party remains in power or if it shifts to more the left or the right. As mentioned, I think the current president, has a few challenges in the country around security and a slow economy. So it'll be interesting to see within the country sort of the people's view of, hey, you need to change something. So you need to make nice with the United States and continue to do business, or see if they continue to have somewhat of maybe a protectionist view. So yeah, I'm not sure if he has a favorite yet, but I think in the next probably 6 to 18 months, that'll become another topic of conversation.
So maybe whoever will agree to pay for the wall.
So, or half of that.
Okay, well, Jack, back to you. Part of the rhetoric we heard, particularly through the election process, was border adjustment tax. And a couple of things. What would that mean, and do you think there's congressional support for that?
Just a quick word on Mexico too, for those who are working in the Mexican market and have a concern about U.S. and Mexico relations in general, because when President Peña Nieto canceled his trip to the U.S., it certainly made a lot of news and appeared fairly ominous as far as the future of U.S. and Mexico relations. But I've been around, just so people know, I've been around enough of officials from Mexico, and they've said that they feel that they've been treated very well by this administration. They have an open door. They spent a lot of time together really talking about the relationship and some of the non-trade things there. So I think as far as U.S. and Mexico relations at a government-to-government level, I think they're a lot better than what is predicted in the press, which I think could help with these negotiations. As far as the tariffs, the president on the campaign trail had threatened the imposition of tariffs in a number of different contexts. I think he talked about manufacturing that leaves the United States, Mexico, China to a degree. I think that has really receded. I think part of it is that anybody that the U.S. is in a trade relationship with or members of the WTO, fellow members of the WTO, there really are legal limits on the U.S. imposing tariffs outside of extraordinary legal situations. There's some statutory measures that allow temporary increases in duties, but it really has receded, and I think the president has made clear that we're going to explore other avenues to pursue fairness and pursue new agreements before we would resort to tariffs. The one area where the tariff question still remains is as you mentioned, David, the border adjustment tax, which is an element of the House tax reform plan developed by Speaker Ryan. And I think there really are two elements on it. I don't know precisely how it works, but component parts, really imports are taxed, but similar component parts that are manufactured in the United States are not taxed or are deductible. But in the appeal of it is, from Ryan's standpoint, is that when you crunch your numbers to try to come up with the revenue that you would need to pursue a fairly comprehensive tax reform plan, the score is massive. It generates a lot of money, and it would really allow them to move forward on their corporate tax simplification plan. So I think that's the attraction there. And for others, it does have the incentive where it could potentially make domestic manufacturing more attractive. The other problem is obviously that it is an immediate tax in the neighborhood of 20% on imports, and so these are costs that consumers are going to feel. They're going to feel right away, whether it's cell phones, whether it's certain kinds of groceries, but really a lot of basic household items I think would be impacted by that. Now, the economists would argue that we would all see an appreciation of the dollar that would increase their purchasing power, and it all washes out at the end. But I don't think that theory is one that's going to be very appealing to members of Congress. And so, at last check, I think the border adjustment tax is still part of the House plan. But I think the support in the House is slipping, and I don't think it has a necessary level of support in the Senate. So it could be revived, but I just, as of today, it doesn't appear as it's going to make it into any tax reform plan. But book's not closed yet.
Okay. Well, I'm looking at the time. I'm going to reduce this to one more question. It's kind of a two-part question. We'll open it up for Q&A so we give all of you a chance to ask a few questions. And this is related to Brexit. For those of you who may have heard that term a lot, not know exactly what it is, although I'm sure most of you do. It's the exit of the United Kingdom from the European Union, which that country basically had a vote last summer and surprisingly decided to do that. So the question, first part, Jack, is to you. So what are the next steps for Prime Minister May now that Article 50 has been voted?
So I think she's really made the big decision. The big decision was whether or not, initially I think the UK thought that they could, in a way, almost cherry pick, continue to stay potentially in the single market for this product or this industry. They made the decision that we're just going to have a clean break, and then we will go back to the negotiating table and negotiate a comprehensive FTA with Europe. There's a lot of other messy issues that they need to settle first, so the actual exit involves property, financial obligations and commitment, and settling all those sorts of things. So there's money involved, and those are going to be very, very difficult, and some immigration status issues as well too. But they hope to, in about 9 months, pivot, and it would essentially be a UK-EU comprehensive free trade negotiation, which really would cover just about every sector and dictate market access, tariff, customs, and all those trade-related questions. They've got. That could technically go on beyond the 2 years, but I think their goal is to start in about 9 months and hopefully be done within the 2 years. And the next major thing is really the EU has to lay out what their negotiating objectives are. And that will come out on the 29th, where there's a meeting of all the remaining 27 member states, and they have to agree on that. And then the negotiations can begin.
So, Eric, I'm going to turn to you on the second part of this. So what are some of the key considerations for U.S. companies that are today doing business in the UK and in the European Union?
Yeah, this is very interesting because it's obviously unprecedented. I think waiting to see in the next 2 years how this plays out and the effect of maybe your suppliers or other customers, see what happens to them, I think will be very interesting. For one consideration, you might hear about citizenship or passporting. So you've got a British citizen that's able to work in the EU or vice versa, as it is now. So depending on how these negotiations go, there may be issues around that, where there's a limitation of folks from the EU working in London, let's say, as a major financial hub, or vice versa. So there could be certainly a very large, perhaps, shift in employees, or where a company may look to locate its business or its employees. I think another issue, agreements that companies have with suppliers, again, depending on how these free trade agreements are renegotiated. Any contracts that you have in place with your counterparties and suppliers certainly could be something that you would certainly want to review. And I think lastly, banking relationships. We all know that London is a major financial hub. Many banks have a presence there. They're able to open up numerous foreign currency accounts in London. So that could be affected as well. So perhaps, only UK denominated entities or UK legal entities, for example, are allowed to open up accounts in London. And a Dutch entity maybe needs to be open in the Netherlands and items like that. So again, there could be some major impact. I think it's a bit of a wait and see at this point. I think, any of you that are doing business there, certainly, don't wait, make sure you understand where are my accounts and, what currencies might I be holding? Is it euro or pound sterling? That certainly could be affected, with some volatility in the certainly in the coming years. But just understand where that business is and understand that if there's a shift, and you have to relook at your suppliers and your banking relationships, that you've done that ahead of time.
Good. Well, I think at this point, I've got other questions, but I think we're going to run out of time, and we want to allow you some time to ask questions. Since Parker is our most athletic member of this team, I'm going to ask that he take Ronnie's microphone. If you have a question, could you just hold up your hand so that everybody can hear it. We'd like you to use the microphone. So, are there any questions? Over here.
Well, just today, President Trump just went back on his comments about China being a currency manipulator. When people like to try to determine what the next policy is going to be, what indicators do you look at? From what we've seen in the past, we can never tell what the hell he's talking about. We can never trust what he's saying. So, what indicators would you trust?
You just have to read the statements, read the statements of his officials, and I don't think he's, like I said, in the area of trade, I don't think that he's drifted too far from the core principles. In the case of China, the U.S. Treasury Department puts out a report twice a year. It's on their website, and I can't remember the formal name, but it's the report on international economics. A significant feature of it, though, is looking at exchange rate management and other actions of governments in the previous 6 months. And there's a long track record of them criticizing China's intervention. Past administrations have chosen not to elevate it for a variety of different reasons. But market conditions have changed, and in a way, I think it's almost to his credit to recognize that fact and step away from it, because the conditions have changed. But like I said, there's a lot of policies to develop. This is a person that comes out of the real estate world, which is international. I think his business is international in nature, but it's not trade related. You haven't had to deal with security issues, so if somebody's making a significant transition into areas that he's never been around before. So there's going to be an adjustment, and there's going to be a learning curve, and a lot of it is just putting behind political rhetoric. But I think you listen and ask questions, same as again everybody does in their information gathering process.
Question in the back.
Hi there. It's late, I'm tired, I hope I'm coherent. Chase JP Morgan, your powerhouse. Many of us are customers of you. And our new president, whatever the case may be, there's a plan versus action. There's promises versus reality. So with that as the backdrop to what you've said so far, is that shapes our policy and our strategy. In other words, your policy and your strategy as Chase JP Morgan. So as customers, many of us who are, how does that affect us with you? In other words, your go-forward plan based upon what is going on right now. What is your strategy? What is your policy? And how is that going to affect us from this point forward?
Yeah, I'll take a stab at that. Yeah. So, do we have any softballs out there? You know, I would say, if you know anything about our organization, you have to look at our leader, which is Jamie Dimon. That guy is as solid as a rock, and he does not bend with the political winds. He doesn't bend with anything other than his own plans. I would tell you, and you know, I'm having to forecast a little bit here, but my read of that would be related to what we do. We look at our own plans, but we also pay attention to what's going on around us and what can affect those plans. I think the biggest issue, maybe front and center for us, is what impacts our clients first, and then what impacts us directly. What impacts us directly in this piece is probably more around the regulatory environment. And I think right now there's a lot of people on the business community side that are having a voice in Washington to say what is good regulation, what is maybe okay regulation, and what is regulation that might move the needle a fraction of an inch but is very costly. And I think there's a real effort to get some clarity around that and not to do away with regulation, but to start looking at it from the perspective of how does it impact these different industries, ours being one of them. So I think that's the area where we're most directly impacted as an organization. But quite frankly, the greater impact to us is what happens to our broader client base in this process. You know, I think the challenge is in this first 100 days, they're still forming the team and they're still developing policy. So all of us are a little bit in a wait and see mode. I think we're hopeful that as time goes on and as the team really gets in place and kind of in our first question of the night, talking about really having all of the large organizations that are going to be working on policy, that we'll start to see some momentum there. I think we've had a pretty clear indication from President Trump as to the things he'd like to attack. We still have a long ways to go to see how well he's going to be able to execute on that.
I would just add too, if you have not, I would always recommend reading his shareholder letter.
Yeah.
Came out last week, I believe, and so as David said, Jamie's very forthright, and there's about 45 pages of his thoughts in the shareholder letter, and it's always a very interesting and informative read, and talks about what he's seeing in the world and the direction for the company.
Thank you. Mr. Trump actually campaigned on bluster and he has to govern on reality. So now we see him walking back from bluster to reality. The question is that his voters and his supporters who bought on his bluster, they're going to be disappointed when they find out that governance has to be grounded in reality and not in bluster. So what do you think is going to happen in the political arena in future, say 1 year down the road, when he's not going to deliver on his bluster? We already started to see that. You know, he campaigned on calling China, currency manipulator. China, I know, stealing $400 billion from us every year. And today he's saying that no, that is not the case. So how is he going to sell that to his core supporters?
I mean, I think that's a really good question. And it's a very interesting question. And I think a lot of people recognize that some of the campaign rhetoric was excessive and non-traditional and really did not know what to expect from a governance standpoint because he's a true political outsider. And I think that's something that they're going to have to deal with. And if he decides that he wants to run for re-election, that is something that he's going to have to address. It's a great question. And, I think a lot of people are going to be looking to see how that plays out. And, me among them.
You said it. Thank you very much.
Constance Holst machine shop? Yeah. I am not so interested in your predictions because who knows what would happen. That would be an earthquake tomorrow, right now, with California. But I would like to remember Adama da Silva. A good thing to say about him is he knew trade when trade was good. And he sold me his book. A guy, a person who loved his original country, Sri Lanka, who used to be called Ceylon. But still, that's what he did. And he sold me this book for $25. And when I asked the students around, they said, why? We only paid $20. That's what I believe about that.
We might have time for maybe one more question if there is one.
I just have a really quick one, and I can project. What outside of your personal contacts would be the best news source to get some
I'm sorry, I didn't hear the
to
end.
get some real news?
Real news
Yeah, like you look to on daily to get.
as opposed to fake news?
I say that, but what do you look to every day to get your updates?
You know, I hope there's no press in the room, okay? But I'm going to tell you something that I heard from Bryant Gumbel a few years ago. We had him as a keynote speaker at an event in Tulsa, actually, and I got to spend an afternoon with him, and we were talking about just that issue, and I said, so what would you tell a young person today in terms of how they form their opinions and where they get their information? And I loved his response. He said, I would tell them to go seek out sources that are counter to their point of view. I think today, in his view, most of us gravitate to some sort of news source that reinforces the way we think and misses the other side of the conversation. If you're asking for a news source that's truly practicing journalism, I can't give you a good example myself. I can tell you some sources I use, but they all, quite frankly, have an editorial piece to them that swings one way or another. I don't know, others may have a different response for that.
Well, I agree to look for sources that you may or may not agree with, but I like The Economist. I think it has shorter articles, and it comes out on a weekly basis. So it's something that, because I think it's hard to, if you have a busy life, it's hard to, just keep up with everything all the time. But I like The Economist because it's very global, and it kind of goes into a lot of different details. So that's what I like.
I read the Wall Street Journal every day but Sunday because they don't publish on Sunday. I think the FT is an excellent paper as well too. And then Politico covers Washington, I think, more thoroughly than anybody else. A lot of people take exceptions with some of their coverage, but they're very thorough and also focus on policy issues as well as just pure theatrics and politics.
Okay, well, hey, listen, we really appreciate you letting us stand up here and talk to you. It's been a great evening. Really nice to hear the comments about Dr. De Silva, and certainly all of us will miss him and his influence in this organization, but thank you.
Thank you all very much. You've been a wonderful panel. This has been very informative, carrying on in the tradition of great meetings that Dr. De Silva has set for us. I'd like to recognize each of you with a certificate of appreciation and with a copy of our directory. David Page, thank you very much. Veronica Thomas, thank you very much. Jack Bartling, thank you very much. And Eric Mulazans, thank you very much. Thank you all for your attendance here. As I mentioned earlier, one of the great ways of honoring Dr. Dharma De Silva in furthering his work is by making a contribution to the Dr. Dharma De Silva Scholarship Fund. Those envelopes are on the table outside as you leave your badges, and I've been informed by the family that they are going to match donations that are made on that behalf. So any donations will do double the good for continuing Dr. De Silva's work. Thank you all very much.
I'll see you cool cats on Tuesday. Have a wonderful Easter.